Greetings, Guardians. My name is Byfear. There's been a development, something unprecedented, that has been expanding in front of our eyes the entire time, but which has also gone quietly unexplained. It concerns the Dreadnought, the Taken, and the many strange eyes and tendrils that have been undulating from the Ascendant Plane. Originally, it seemed as though these new Taken and the new infestation of the Dreadnought was a result of the Echo and the returning Taken King. But now, we have a new set of reasons to question this. There's always been hints that there's been some new presence stirring within the Dreadnought, stirring the Taken there, and there was always also an assumption that could go with this. With another influence being plied over the Taken, and with the whispers of its presence being more openly discussed, I always assumed that it was the Winnower, or perhaps that it was the Winnower working through the Echo of Navigation. But this new iteration of Oryx has revealed to us recently through the Court of Blades that this might well not be the case at all.
We are not alone in the deep. Something I cannot see stands between the Winnower and the Taken. Carve these offerings free from their weakness, King, before something else does.
And so, a new mystery unfolds. Between the Winnower and the Taken King's memory, a new force is rising from within the deep. One so far unknown to us, but one which has presumably been watching along this whole time. Today I'm going to try and lift the veil just a little bit on this new presence, and whilst I won't be able to lay down a concrete idea of who they are, I do have some rather interesting guesses as to what they might be. I think we should start off with some notable points. We know that these tendrils and the Taken are connected because the tendrils are also present on these new dire Taken. These tendrils may be part of what's connected to our new presence here on the Dreadnought, seeing as they do not appear to be connected to the new Echo of the Navigator. They do, however, seem to come forth from the Ascendant Plane. We can also presume that there are some factors at play that leave a little confusion for us, which needs to be untangled. The Taken appear to be following the command of the Dread under the leadership of the Subjugator, who is presumed to be Kater, the murderer of Eris Morn. But even this is questionable. In some instances, the Taken are working in service of the Dread. In other instances, such as in the Barrow Dyad Derealize mission, there are notes from Sloane that the Dread are actually turning on their Taken troops, and therefore the relationship between these Taken and the Dread is somewhat unknown to us as well. What we do know is that the Dread and the Taken don't necessarily have an internal hierarchy where one is always leading the other, though. Both of them came here not to lead but to follow. They were seeking out something that called them to the Dreadnought, something which has enough power to command them both, and lead them in the same way that the Witness or Oryx did. This is why I always initially assumed it was the Winnower. After all, what other kind of being could potentially command such respect and power? But guesses are always incomplete until we find out the whole picture, and this one was too. As it turned out, the whole picture, as Oryx stated, was that there was something stirring the Taken that stood between them and the Winnower. So our big bad of the entire universe is being mentioned here, but is still being kept in the background for now. As for what this thing is between the Winnower and the Taken, we don't know. This means we need to reassess basically everything about the whole of the episode, and all of the assumptions which I drew to the Winnower. There is inevitably going to be a fingerprint there. After all, where did the Taken come from? The assumption is the deep, and therefore the Winnower is the assumed creator of the Taken. However, this new force standing between the Winnower and the Taken is an unknown quantity to us, but its call brought the Taken and the Dread here. So, what is it? An unnamed and unknown master. And for the moment, and lacking any other information about who this might be or what this might be, that's kind of how I'm going to refer to this new threat. The Unknown Master will be the name I use until we get a better idea of what it is. So, who or what is the Unknown Master of the Taken and the Dread? Starting at the top, we can take a few things for granted. Whatever it is, its tendrils pour outwards from the blights of Taken energy all over the Dreadnought, meaning that whatever it is, it likely resides within the Ascendant Plane. If it's been controlling the Taken and the Dread, it's also likely to be the force behind the commandeering of the aversion anchors on the Dreadnought, which are being sent out to the various planets of the system. Whatever it ends up being, its intentions for Earth and Sol generally cannot be good. We also know that this Unknown Master must have knowledge of the power to take, because new Taken, dire Taken at that, are being created. That creates an extremely small list of potential candidates, and also implies that whoever it is must be unbelievably powerful to be able to call upon and command the attention of both the Taken and the Dread.
We are not alone in the deep. Something I cannot see stands between the Winnower and the Taken. Carve these offerings free from their weakness, King, before something else does.
I have kept watch over the husk of Akka as it slept, quiet and unclaimed. Now something, sent by hand unseen, vivifies the long-dead flesh of the Dreadnought, rousing ancient, Taken wills, hungry with ambition.
Something is doing this on purpose. The Taken are always looking for someone with a backbone strong enough to lead them. It's one thing to pull Taken from the Ascendant Plane and make them dance, but ringing out new ones.
In fact, this call has been going out across the entire system and has been picked up by the Dread and Taken, and it's been mentioned a whole bunch, not just by the audio, but also within the lore of the season as well. Assumptions just let us think that this force might be intimately connected to the Winnower, but again, those assumptions probably are incorrect at this point, so we need to reassess. For example, in the Apostate's Blade Helm, Sloane notices that behind the quieter whispers of the deep, which we presume are the Winnower at this point, there is also a new, louder voice that is asking her to take up the knife. In the Barrow Dyad mission, Sloane thought that the weapon we acquired was the source of the Taken power calling out to us, until the arrival of Zur-Kur and his Taken Remnant. Taken Remnant who might well also be attached to this new source of Taken power. The lore tab of the Barrow Dyad was also something that I assumed was making reference to the Winnower, but now I'm not so sure, especially seeing as it keeps on saying a sentence that seems to corroborate everything to do with what this entity appears to be calling upon each of us to do, which is take up the knife. It is what Sloane heard in her louder whispers as well. So we know there is that call constantly going out, but the real question then becomes, who is the call from? If we're going to answer that question, we should at least cross out a few names on our list first. For one, I don't believe it to be Akka, the worm god that Oryx killed long ago in order to learn the power to take. Akka is dead, and in some of the lore that we're going to read, he is basically non-responsive. After all, he has been turned into the baleful armor of the Dreadnought. He is dead, perhaps not too dead not to dream, but not able to control the Taken. A character such as Toland the Shattered might have the inclination to control the Taken and Dread like this, but I think that they lack the power and influence to control them in such vast numbers, unless something has changed and I didn't know about it. But as best I know, Toland is still living in his throne... well, it's not quite a throne world. It's a spit of land in the Sea of Screams. It's more of a throne dumpster. Either way, I don't think it's Toland. I don't think it's Xivu Arath either, not just because of her weakened state, but also because of the fact that her hive brood is currently on the Dreadnought and is at odds with the Taken and the Dread. I also doubt that it's Savathun, but it's not implausible given the wide-ranging scope of her powers. But the thing about all of them is that none of these characters truly fit snugly into everything to do with this new commanding voice over the Taken. And then there are the strange aesthetic qualities to whatever is behind this. The tendrils and the eyes that inflict suffocating terror. These are completely unknown to us. We've never seen anything quite like this. Even when we have seen similar instances of eyes, well, it's never really appeared quite like this. I don't think I recognize these kinds of eyes either. Not to mention, the command that this entity has over the Taken is rather staggering. I mean, these new Taken now have command over the powers of Stasis and Strand, amongst other things, which means that these dire Taken have some really deep source of darkness controlling them, I imagine. Something just doesn't add up here, and I think we have very few clues to really work on. It might well be that this is a completely unknown character that's never been introduced before, a mysterious and ominous eldritch force from deep within the Ascendant Plane that is reaching out now to control the Taken. Maybe there is no clue to it thus far in the lore, which would actually be kind of fresh, but I do have one really weird outside possibility to discuss. It starts with a perspective, namely Asa's perspective. She's also been hearing the call, and her perspective as a proto-hive worm god gives us some really unique insight, and it just so happens that there is a lore tab where we can hear her thoughts on the matter. In this lore tab, she is dreaming, just like she's been doing since her efforts to communicate with us through Sloane in the Season of the Deep. But in those dreams, she hears a voice, a call of some sort. Take a listen to the lore tab from the new Sparrow, Endling Seek. We still hope to see another. What do you call someone who is blood of your blood, heritor of a similar ancient lineage, yet deeply changed, whom you have never known dearly, in fact barely at all, but whose echoes you see in the still pond, the polished glass? Asa settles for cousin. Aya, Yul, Zol, Akka, dead Akka, whose everted bones circle Saturn in twin orbit with Titan, where Asa dreams. Of all the cousin names, it is that one that catches Asa, rolls along her flukes and shivers, rippling in the methane dream. There is some mirror where Asa is the ship, Akka the refugee. An accident of parentage, one sibling this river, the other that stream. And so, how does Asa hate what she nearly was? Cousin bones, family bones, swimming as she does. In her marrow she knows this. She is lucky. Dead Akka hums, and Asa feels it stem to stern. She stirs from her dream to roll as she listens, a long stretch of blade's edge, crystal, parchment, and the breath of the galaxy along her flank. Asa hums back, of course. She can't help herself, even knowing better. Your cousin calls out, "I am here. Is anyone there?" And you answer. You answer. Dead Akka does not answer. It is a ghost firing of bone neurons. Zol does not answer. Zeta and Cell and Aura and Lace do not answer. Some glutted, war-fed cousin long across the sea of screams calls out. A distant worm song threat. Asa goes quiet, remembers all at once, presses her consciousness close to her Titan, settles back into a softer, subtler dream. In that dream, Asa is not the last. So it almost sounds like the one who was responding to these threats was a worm god of some kind, or maybe another Leviathan from all the way back on Fundament, a distant cousin of Asa and Akka. It might not be impossible for this to be one of the 3 remaining worm gods, namely Yul, Aya, or then why not mention them by name in that moment? They aren't unknown to Arsa, presumably. What's more, the Worm Gods are presumably still in league with Xivu Arath and her brood to some extent. So if they were the ones, or if one of them was the one controlling the Taken and the Dread, why in the world would they be battling against Xivu's forces? No, I personally am not convinced that this is Yul, Aya, or although I could be wrong. Lord knows I have been thus far this season. It is always a possibility. But perhaps there is another possibility. Namely, the idea that there was another worm god, or proto-worm god survivor. A preposterous idea at first, I'm sure, but then again, we have heard rumblings of something that fits that description. Does anyone remember the Polyphony lore book back in Echoes? Perhaps not. After all, a lot of people stopped playing at certain points in time and didn't get into the lore of that season. However, there was one rather fascinating moment. A moment where the many perspectives within the Vex network basically described the moment when the Echo fell into the network. The Echo of Command would of course be claimed by Maya Sundaresh, but there were others watching in that moment. The Polyphony, As a Stranger, Give It Welcome lorebook tells us of many perspectives. Copies of Osiris that were lost, the remnants of Praedyth, the many Ishtar Collective researchers, and then there is another. The short excerpt from the lorebook reads, "The great quiet thing, the knotworm, kept its eyes closed and ignored the call. It was still too soon, it decided. It shivered, the motion forming cascading bubbles of new hypothetical simulations in which it did not shiver. These contradictions soured and burst, scattering nutrients into the network." This is next to nothing to go on, and frankly, I don't put too much stock in it for the moment. It's an interesting possibility, and it is also somewhat marred by the fact that this is a being within the Vex network. However, that doesn't completely kill the idea, because, after all, Arsa heard the call from across the Sea of Screams and across the Ascendant Plane, and also the call from the Dreadnought seems to be coming from the deep. And as it turns out, you can indeed connect the Vex network to the Ascendant Plane. We know this thanks to Crota. It's the reason that he was banished from the High War. He allowed the Vex, including Quaria, to invade, and through sword logic they were able to gain purchase for close to a century, until Oryx returned and beat back the forces of the Vex. After this, he took Crota and told him to return glorious or die forgotten, throwing him into the Vex network through the same hole that he had carved with his blade. And so, we do indeed have the possibility of linking the Ascendant Plane to the Vex network. It's not impossible, therefore, that the Sea of Screams, the main darkness that drives through the entirety of that dimension, is somehow connected to the Vex network as well. If that is the case, then perhaps this Knotworm has been watching for a long time, and maybe now it is the time for it to engage, and thus it has started calling out. We have nothing concrete. Everything I've just stated is only a series of guesses, and even with that last guess, I believe that we still don't know enough to put anything firmly down. I would almost love it if this was nothing mentioned in the lore and that the story revolved around this new unknown master of the Taken being an anonymous force that we would discover later, something which is alluded to and which brings us down a path of ambition, but which also calls out to us, and yet we do not know its name. Eldritch horror is something hard to do, but in this instance I think there's a chance for the Taken to represent what that might be. And remember, even if we don't know the name of this entity, even if we've never seen it, we know that it's there. And more importantly, it enticed us to claim the Barrow Dyad. Its call set us on the path of ambition. This entity is nothing to take lightly. It still has a stake in what's going on the Dreadnought, and it is one piece of the mystery of this place that we still do not understand. Unraveling it is doubtless bound to be important. But that's all from me for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like and leave your thoughts down below in the comments section. Also, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications and get lore from universes near and far. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Rhodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.